Welcome back to Big Mouth and welcome to Monday's edition of the dceu Daily. Remember, you can follow me and tag me on Twitter at Movies TV Man. Yes, Ben Fritz released the Snyder Cut. Are you nuts, Mick? That guy's scum. He did a hack piece. He tried to take us down. You're right. He did. He tried that and he failed. Ben Fritz didn't wake up one morning and decide to do a hit piece about the Snyderverse fandom and our claims that a Snyder Cut actually existed. No. I'm going to make some alleged accusations here, and I'm just going to allege them because I can't prove these things. It's just my opinion. Ben Fritz was instigated to write a piece about the Release the Snyder Cut movement because we were making so much noise. Kevin Sujihara at Warner Brothers, at the old regime of WB, got very scared. Imagine it. Little old us. Little old us. It's a bit like Fox Mulder in the early seasons of The X-Files, right? They called him Spooky Mulder because he claimed his sister was abducted by aliens. And he sacrificed his whole career trying to prove the existence of extraterrestrials. This is what the Release the Snyder Cut movement was to the mainstream people. But to the studio, they knew we were speaking the truth. They knew, of course, that they drove Zack Snyder from the project and what they were trying to do. They knew a Snyder Cut existed. So they had to disqualify what we were saying. So what did they do? Did they get any old journalist? No. They got Ben Fritz from the Wall Street Journal. But why? Why Ben and why the Wall Street Journal? Because the Wall Street Journal is one of the most recognizable, respected media outlets in the world. It must be true. The Wall Street Journal said it. But how did this all start? Well, all of a sudden, Ben Fritz was, let's just say, contacting people with a lot of following from the Snyderverse fandom. People like Davey Pienaar, people like Chris Wong-Svensson. I was following Chris way before Justice League. I was following him just after, I think, BVS. And he was one of the few people championing the Snyderverse at the time. It was like finding a friend, right? Chris was doing a great job, as he is now. And I remember him saying that he'd been contacted by Fritz. Now, Chris is a really intelligent lad, so he did know that maybe it was a hit piece, but he was willing to take the risk because he wanted to put this, what we were saying, what we were fighting for in mainstream media. He was right to do so. It came apparent when that article came out that it was a hit piece. It wasn't just a hit piece that was trying to prove or try to say or try and lie about the lack of a Snyder Cut existing. It wanted to make the people fighting for the cut look like a bunch of nutters. So what did it do? It took people's words like Chris Wong-Svensson and Davey Pienaar, mashed them up, and pretty much twisted what they had said. It was a really polarizing moment, a moment where we sat down and started to think if we should keep on fighting for this. I know I gave up for a little time, as I've mentioned on this channel before. But it's that moment that galvanized our movement. It galvanized Zack Snyder to stand up and go to Vero and start posting about his cut. This changed everything. So yes, Ben Fritz released the Snyder Cut inadvertently. It was going to be easy. Kevin Sujihara implemented Ben Fritz from the Wall Street Journal to do a hit piece. It was going to be easy. Apparently interviewing insiders from the studio saying, no, this doesn't exist. It's never going to happen. It's just hearsay. The Snyder Cut doesn't exist. They're a bunch of nutters. Why didn't it work? Why? I mean, it was perfect. Let's be honest, if you're going to do a hit piece like that. You see, Access Media and multi-billion-dollar conglomerates have been working together for the beginning of time. Media, global government, and multi-billion trillion dollar outlets have been working together to put out a narrative since the beginning of time. They work together. Media isn't just your newspapers and sites and Scott Mendelson. Media is what you get on your telly box. Films, TV. Television and media have been controlling how you think from the day you were born. Through TV shows, through films. They train our minds because our minds, when we're kids, are like a sponge. We absorb so much. Now, I've been watching television since I was a child, a bit like Frank Cross from the Scrooged movie, from the Bill Murray Scrooged movie, directed by Richard Donner. And so I have a certain kind of point of view. I'm obsessed with TV and movies because I've been watching it since I was a kid. So I don't even know. None of us know what we're doing or saying at that moment is because of what we've been trained to think. It's a hypnosis. It sounds out there, but it's true. So if Ben Fritz did this right, there will be no more talk of a Snyder Cut. Even the people, even us fighting for the cut might start to doubt ourselves. And I think a lot of us did. But Zack Snyder, as I said, stood up. And the problem was for Ben Fritz, the Wall Street Journal, and Kevin Sugihara, when the director is posting pictures of his cut and says he's never seen Justice League before and he's got evidence that it exists, you've got a problem. You see, all Kevin Sugihara and Warner Brothers had to do was keep their mouth shut and hope for the best. And hope they didn't kind of engulf and motivate Zack Snyder to stand up and prove his cut existed. But Zack Snyder was driven off this project. Zack Snyder always wanted to continue doing DC projects, and he wanted the world to see his version of Justice League. And this was the motivating factor from him coming out. Maybe Zack would have always stood up in the end and showed us evidence that his cut existed, not just us, but the world. But it was Ben Fritz's article that did it. This is how media works. This is how journalism works. They work for a paymaster. It was easy. An interesting article, a long article, getting quotes from fans, getting quotes from the studio itself. It was supposed to be an easy takedown. But it didn't happen. As us British say, it went tits up. In a big way. All of a sudden, we were galvanized, Zack was galvanized, and we never looked back. There were still hit pieces. They still tried it, and they tried. And the more they tried it, the more transparent it looked. They were scared. That's why Ben Fritz was implemented to do the article, because they were afraid. Ben Fritz and the Release the Snyder Cut movement, which I was very much a part of and still am, although I'm thoroughly a DC fan who loves everything DC, right? It's not just about Snyder for me, but I love what he's done with DC, want to see his Justice League, and I want to see him continue. But even if Zack never gets to do one more DC project again, we're talking about over 9.5 hours of DC footage from his vision when we see Zack Snyder's Justice League Snyder Cut. Imagine that. 2.5 hours of Man of Steel. 3 hours of Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice. Then 4 hours of Zack Snyder's Justice League. Maybe my math's wrong. But basically, even if he only gets that, he would have done something amazing. I've argued with people who say, you know, your mainstream person doesn't even know what the Snyder Cut is. They do. It's that big. Zack Snyder was this underdog, as were we, fighting a multi-trillion-dollar concern. We didn't stand a chance. But you see, this is what happens when people stand up together, even though we can be very divided as individual people. We stood up together and we still stand for events together. That's the difference. We can be divided in everyday little narratives, stupid conversations, right? like whether or not to call it release the Snyder Cut, Zack Snyder's Justice League, Snyder Cut, okay. Silly arguments like that don't matter. When it comes to events, we stand together. They knew it. And this is why Ben Fritz was tasked to do this article. It would be the last mistake Kevin Sujihara would make, because Ben Fritz didn't just release the Snyder Cut. He started the wheel turning of Time Warner being bought by AT&T. How did he do that? Well, because that article made the old Warner Brothers regime weak, because they had shown their weakness by implementing Ben Fritz to do that article. All of a sudden, AT&T saw an avenue to grab that company. They had wanted Warner Brothers for many, many years, but couldn't find a way in. So their aggressive purchase of Time Warner began. Little did we all know the purchase of Time Warner by AT&T would get us exactly what we wanted. Because AT&T didn't have the issues with Snyder that the Time Warner company did. Why? Because they saw something else. They saw an independent director who had created something unique and actually had something to say about the world we live in. Because his DC universe is a DC universe about the world we live in today. A world kind of in fear of terrorism. The kind of 24, Jack Bauer, James Bond, Casino Royale world. Born Identity world. And that's what Zack Snyder's DC Extended Universe is. It's that kind of world. We see how the buildings fall in Man of Steel. We see the paranoia of Superman in BVS. And that will continue in Zack Snyder's Justice League Snyder Cut. So AT&T knew there was mileage here, because the movement that we created was making so much noise. Unbelievably, how did this happen? How was little old us able to defeat a conglomerate, a multi-trillion dollar conglomerate? How were we able to do that? Well, a lot of people in the movement must be congratulated. I'm not going to congratulate myself, because I wasn't leading the events. I didn't come up with the events, but it was clever. Having an advertising board at a football match in the UK, doing what they did with billboards at Comic-Con. The Subway thing, who got Subway involved? I still have this theory that it was Zack. All of a sudden, major corporations were fighting with us to defeat a major corporation, because Subway liked Zack Snyder as well. They loved what he did. A lot of people, more people than you think, love Zack Snyder, love his style of filmmaking and storytelling, and love what he did with these DC characters in these two DC movies. So all of a sudden, the swirling of support. Who are the people who hate Zack Snyder? Really? Is it Access Media? Is it the old regime of WB? You see, the problem is, Zack Snyder is a reminder of their failure. They made a decision to get rid of him, put a few smiles on and some bright colours, and they thought they were gonna reach the rainbow. But to reach the rainbow, you first have to build the craft. They didn't want to build the craft to reach the rainbow. They wanted to cheat. And you can't cheat the consumer, no matter how much you try on whatever spin or blag that you use. And this was a display of what Ben Fritz in the Wall Street Journal attempted to do. So many good people rose up because of that article. I mean, the movement was strong. That's why that article was done. But you can all pat yourselves on the back, because we continue to expose these people. Look at what they did with Joker movie, Todd Phillips' Joker movie. They tried to take it down. Why? Because it was about a man suffering with mental illness. And unfortunately, there's some crazy people out there who believe that film was making excuses for violent men. That's not what the film's doing. Now, Todd Phillips himself says he's not trying to make big commentary about anything. But whether he did it on purpose or not, it does display how mental illness is perceived, not just back in the 80s and the 70s, but now. It's still not taken seriously by a lot of people. You see, Arthur Fleck wouldn't have become the Joker if someone had just believed in him. Someone didn't allow this mentally ill man to care for his mother, who wouldn't have allowed his mother and her boyfriend or whoever it was to abuse him like they did. He wouldn't have killed his mother. He wouldn't have become the Joker. It's a stark warning to the world we live in. Now we look at Birds of Prey and the emancipation of one Harley Quinn. That makes commentary about toxic masculinity. Now, I'm not going to say that's a fictional commentary because 20, 30 years ago, bad men were running the world and doing all sorts of horrible things to women. So I get it. But ultimately, nobody wants to watch films about toxic masculinity. Not even women. Not really. A small percentage of alt leftists want to watch a film like that. So it's interesting. They blew smoke up Margot Robbie's perfectly formed behind over that film, calling it an amazing film. We all know that Birds of Prey isn't an amazing film. If those of you who like it, congratulations. Good luck to you. But you see, Joker won. Joker won the argument. Because it was trying to tell you a story, plus it was about Joker. It's an Elseworld story about an Elseworld Joker that doesn't tie into anything. But it's a very powerful story, portrayed by one of the best actors in the world, who's also been going through serious shit from being a child. He lost his brother, River Phoenix, who was one of the most famous young men in the world. He had to grow up with that knowledge. And so there's something in him as well. So there was something very, and I hate this word about films, but important about the Joker movie and who was playing it, who was directing it, and the mainstream media narrative was to destabilize it. All the articles you read about the Joker being a dangerous movie is no less a hit piece than what Ben Fritz tried to do with the release the Snyder Cut narrative that we'd created. The true narrative. Fake narratives versus true narratives. When President Kennedy was assassinated, they tried to convince the world, right, government and mainstream media, that a magic bullet had wounded Kennedy and Connolly. Because if there's no magic bullet, then there must be a conspiracy, which means there's more than one shooter, and maybe Lee Harvey Oswald was the patsy he claimed to be, as I believe so. We're not here to talk about that. But that's the point. Mainstream media set up any narrative that they want. And this is what Ben Fritz in the Wall Street Journal attempted to do. But it failed. That's amazing. Because without Ben Fritz and what he attempted to do, we wouldn't be here now. As I say, I'm just alleging these things. Ben Fritz could just be a nice, sweet, cuddly, passionate, investigative reporter who was just doing his job. But seeing there is a Snyder Cut, seeing that Zack Snyder's Justice League will be released on HBO Max on March the 18th, if Ben wasn't attempting to do a hit piece, he certainly got it wrong. He certainly owes Zack Snyder an apology and us fans. Will we ever get one? Of course not. He'll just carry on blocking people who come at him. But we know the truth. We can't prove the truth, so we've got to be careful what we say. But we know that Ben Fritz wasn't working alone. And we know why that article was done. We know the motivation behind Ben Fritz's Snyderverse hit piece. And it failed. You failed, Ben. A decorated journalist from a decorated, world-famous media outlet. And you, every time someone hashtags the Snyder Cut, release the Snyder Cut, Zack Snyder's Justice League, every time somebody watches Zack Snyder's Justice League, you are embarrassed. You are a respected, talented journalist, and you did a hit piece. This is not what journalism should be about. But the truth is, this is what journalism will always be about, and it's what it's always been about. But now with the internet and the freedoms we have on the internet, we can take these people down. Now the question is, how long will they allow us these freedoms on the internet is another thing. How long will they put up with us exposing them, exposing their power? Before I go, I will give you a fine example. Hollywood actors keep on talking about defunding the police, defunding billionaires. Hollywood have the most corrupt police service in the world, which was only created to protect their misbehavior. Hollywood actors make content and advertise that content for multi-billionaire conglomerations, aka the studios. So how can they want to defund billionaires and make it a fairer world and defund the police from brutalizing people of colour and other minorities if they are supporting the problem? There you go. We see them on our Twitter timelines all the time, don't we? Even making light of Zack Snyder and his vision. But they all lost. You know who won? You did. You won. Honest, working class people who fell in love with a vision of a director. You won because what you were doing wasn't toxic, wasn't antagonistic. It was so pure. The world saw it and the world stood with us. Yes, my friends, please go and thank Ben Fritz for releasing the Snyder Cut. Comment down below, like, share and subscribe, and I'll be back tomorrow with even more DCEU Daily. See you again soon.